Ever wonder how justice is served halfway across the world?
Mm. I'd say justice is a pretty universal concept. What did you have in mind?
Well, today we're looking at Colombia.
Ah, interesting. What kind of sources are we talking about?
We've got excerpts from Nociones Derecho Penal.pdf. It's a document outlining their criminal law system.
Nociones Derecho Penal.pdf. That's a foundational text in Colombian law. It gives a really good overview of their penal code.
And I have to say, some of this stuff is pretty surprising. Like right away, Articles 21 through 24, they lay out these different categories of criminal intent.
Oh, absolutely. That's a key part of the Colombian penal system. It's much more nuanced than what you might find in other legal systems.
Yeah, they've got dolo, culpa, and preterintentional.
And each one has a distinct legal meaning. Dolo is your classic intentional wrongdoing. It's when someone commits a crime knowingly and willingly. Like if you plan out a robbery, that's dolo. You know what you're doing, and you want that outcome.
Right, so premeditation is a big part of that. So where does that leave culpa?
Culpa is more about negligence. It's not that you intended to commit a crime, but you acted so carelessly that the outcome was, unfortunately, predictable. Think about a reckless driver.
Oh, okay, I see. They didn't set out to cause an accident, but their actions directly led to it.
Exactly. Now, pretty intentional. That one always gets me thinking. It's when the harm caused goes beyond what the person intended, but was still a foreseeable consequence of their actions.
So like those unintended consequences scenarios.
Exactly. Imagine someone gets into a heated argument, right? And they push the other person, intending to just knock them down.
Yeah.
But the person falls, hits their head, and dies.
Tragic accident, but still a crime was committed.
Right, because even though the death wasn't intentional, it was a foreseeable outcome of the push. And that's where the Colombian legal system gets really interesting.
How so?
It takes intent into account, even when the consequences are unintended. Preterintentional lands in this fascinating gray area. The penalties are usually less severe than dolo, but more serious than culpa.
It's wild how much nuance there is. I mean, here we often just talk about guilty or not guilty.
It's true. And that's what makes exploring different legal systems so fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
They really make you think about justice and accountability in new ways.
No kidding. I'm starting to see why Nociones Derecho Penal.pdf is considered such a key text in understanding the Colombian legal system. So, Nociones Derecho Penal.pdf lays out how Colombia classifies criminal intent, but what about the other side of the coin? What about the rights and responsibilities of everyday citizens?
That's where it gets really interesting. The Colombian legal system, and this document really highlights it, puts a big emphasis on civic duty, but balances that with individual rights.
Oh, okay. I'm intrigued. What does that look like in practice?
Well, you have to start with Articles 29 and 95 of the Colombian Constitution.
Those sound familiar.
Article 29 is a presumption of innocence, a pretty universal legal principle. But Article 95, that's where things get interesting. It says that citizens have a duty to assist those in danger.
Oh, wow. So you're not just responsible for protecting your own rights, but you're also expected to look out for others.
Exactly. It's this idea of collective responsibility woven into the fabric of the legal system. And this sense of civic duty, it's taking even further with Article 370 of the Colombian Penal Code.
Article 370, that's one about flagrantia, right?
You got it. Flagrantia gives citizens the right to apprehend someone caught in the act of committing a crime.
Wait, hold on. So anyone can just decide to make a citizen's arrest?
Well, not just anyone.
Yeah.
The law outlines specific scenarios where flagrantia applies. Like if you witness a crime in progress, or if you see someone fleeing from the authorities and you can clearly identify them. The idea isn't to encourage vigilantism, but to empower citizens to help uphold the law when immediate action is needed.
It's kind of like that old saying, see something, say something. But in this case, it's more like, see something, do something.
Yeah, exactly. But, of course, there are limitations and safeguards in place. The law stresses proportionality, meaning you can only use a reasonable amount of force when apprehending someone.
That makes sense. You don't want people going overboard.
Right. And anyone acting under flagrantia has to immediately hand the person over to the police and explain what happened.
So right, but it comes with responsibilities.
Exactly. Nociones Derecho Penal.pdf is really big on emphasizing that balance. Now, on the flip side, what about situations where an individual needs to protect themselves?
You mean like self-defense?
Yes. Article
Yeah.
32 of the Colombian Penal Code talks about legitima defensa, which is their term for self-defense, but it's not as simple as just saying you felt threatened.
Oh, really? So there's more to it than that.
Oh, yeah. There are 5 conditions that have to be met for self-defense to be legally valid in Colombia.
5 conditions. Wow. So it's not just a blanket, you can defend yourself kind of thing.
Nope, not at all. It's taken very seriously in Colombian law. And one of the most important conditions is proportionality.
Proportionality, meaning.
It means that the amount of force you use to defend yourself has to match the level of threat you're facing. You can't just use lethal force against someone who's, say, yelling at you.
So, like, you can't pull out a gun if someone is just threatening you verbally, right?
Exactly. It has to be a reasonable response to a real and imminent danger.
It's really fascinating to see how Nociones Derecho Penal.pdf and I guess the Colombian legal system overall tries to find this balance.
The balance between
Well, like you were saying, balancing individual rights with the responsibility that people have to each other and to society.
absolutely. And you see that throughout Nociones Derecho Penal.pdf. Like the whole concept of dolo, culpa, and preterintentional shows how much thought goes into determining criminal intent. Not all crimes are treated equally.
And then you have flagrancia, where citizens are encouraged to take action. But at the same time, there are those safeguards in place to prevent abuse.
It's all about finding that right balance. And even with self-defense, legitima defensa, it's not just a free pass. You have to meet specific conditions to claim self-defense in Colombia.
It makes you think twice about what you do in those situations. Where,
It certainly does.
yeah,
It reminds us that the law is complex and there are always different perspectives to consider.
that's for sure. Well, I think we've only just scratched the surface of the Colombian legal system today, but Nociones Derecho Penal.pdf has given us a lot to think about.
It really has.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating look at how another culture approaches justice and the role of citizens in upholding the law.
Exactly. And for our listeners, maybe this deep dive has got you thinking, how do your own values and experiences shape how you view these issues? It's a conversation worth continuing, so until next time, keep those legal gears turning.